everyone, and welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCEi webinar. My name is Helen Spiropoulos, and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Associates. And joining me this evening all the way from the university is Dr. Rupert. Good evening to you, Dr. Rupert.
Good evening, Helen, and good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, and I can see that we have quite a few people that have joined us. Thank you so much. It's lovely to have you here with us this evening. How we're going to conduct the webinar is I'm briefly going to introduce you to Stafford and what our function is. I'm then going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who's going to go through the program quite extensively. And towards the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to type out any questions that you would like Dr. Rupert to answer, or any questions that I can answer for you. What I am going to do, however, is I'm going to group the questions together because a lot of these questions are identical. So do listen out for your question and that all-important answer. Okay, so let's get started. Who is Stafford Associates? Well, Stafford has been around since 1993, and we are a resource centre for distance learning education in the Middle East. And we are currently the resource centre for 5 UK universities, one of which is the University of Nottingham. Now, we do offer a variety of programs ranging from certificates to diplomas, bachelors, MBAs, right through until doctorate. So we really do have all the programs for your personal and professional needs. Now, the mere fact that you are here with us this evening means that you have been in touch with one of our experienced academic consultants. And our role at Stafford is to assist you throughout your application process, and we do offer some administrative as well as academic support. Okay, so I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, and I'll be joining you towards the end of the webinar. Over to you, Dr. Rupert.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. Okay, so as Helen said, I'm going to talk to you about the programme. I'm going to start off by talking about the University of Nottingham and the School of Education a bit more generally. And then I'm going to move on and talk about the PGCEi course in particular. And I'm going to tell you about what it's setting out to do, how it's structured, what some of the benefits of the course might be, what you can expect in terms of the experiences and the work you have to do, and finally talk about entry requirements and advice on getting a place on the course. And Helen mentioned at the end there's a chance for me to try and answer any questions you've got. So if there's anything that I haven't covered during this talk, then type those questions in and we'll do our best to deal with those queries as they come. Okay, so the University of Nottingham is a very well-known university in the UK. Lots of you will be very familiar with the name, I'm sure. It's one of what's known in the UK as the Russell Group of universities, which is a small group of elite universities in the UK, which are very heavily research-based universities at the forefront of their fields in research. So it's a highly regarded university in the UK, but also internationally. It's a university also that has a strong global presence. So as well as all sorts of international students, so I'm sitting here in my office in Nottingham right now, and all day long I've heard all kinds of languages and accents from all over the world here at the university itself. But also we have campuses overseas. So we have a campus in Malaysia, for example, and China. So it is a global university. So that's the reputation of the university itself, which is well known. But the School of Education, more specifically, is one of the top ranked schools of education in the UK. So we've been doing education here for something over 100 years. And in the most recent rankings of research in the UK, this institution was ranked 3rd for research in education and is in the top 10, I think it's 8th for education as a subject. So it's a university that's at the forefront of what's going on in terms of education. So why is that important? Well, it's important because of the reputation that a University of Nottingham award might carry in education for prospective employers, but also because the people who've developed the course that you would work on and the tutors that work on that course are part of that team. So we're involved in research, we're exposed to the latest ideas going on in education, and we want to share that with you. So it means the course that you work through, the materials that you work with, and the experiences you have are at the cutting edge of what's happening. And you can also see, for example, the badge on this slide indicating Good University Guide, International University of the Year, and the university has a gold award for teaching quality as well. We have a gold, silver, bronze ranking system in the UK. So all sorts of measures there of sort of excellence for the School of Education. So you're in safe hands. What you probably want to know about, though, is more specifically the PGCEi course. So let's talk about that now. So this is the Postgraduate Certificate in Education International. So this is a master's level course. It's a course that's going to give you credits at master's level, and I'll talk in a little bit about how that might translate into future study afterwards and pursuing the MA. Most people, though, are going to do this course for a year as a standalone postgraduate qualification. So first of all, it's important to point out that this is a master's level program of academic study. What it is not is a program which involves assessing you in school. So we don't come and see you in your workplace. We don't observe you teaching. We don't evaluate your teaching. And we don't ask people in school to evaluate or assess your teaching. So this is not a course that is judging your practical teaching. And as such, it doesn't offer a qualification that is qualified teacher status or a direct license to teach. So it's important to be really clear about that. It's offering an academic program of study, okay? If you are thinking about this as a qualification that is, you hope is going to open doors for you becoming a teacher, then it's going to be extremely useful for that, but you just need to check locally with particular schools in particular regions about what their requirements are for being fully qualified. So we talk about this being a blended learning program. You can see that highlighted on this first bullet point. What we mean by that is this is not simply a distance learning course. This is a course where you will study at your own pace to a certain extent and online at a distance for some of the time, but it's blended because we also come and teach you face to face. So on this course, each cohort is visited by a team of tutors twice in the course. So we visit you at the beginning of the course and we visit you about halfway through the course. So that means that we have that experience of teaching you face to face. You've met your tutors. So for example, in October, I'll be coming out with 4 of my colleagues, and the group that I have there will get to know me, I'll get to know them, and we'll have an intensive teaching workshop over a weekend. So we're not asking you to come away on a school day or get out of work if you're in employment. This takes place over a weekend. And then about halfway through the course, we'll come out to the UAE again, and we'll renew that acquaintance, and we'll have the second part of our face-to-face teaching. So the fact that we've met you and you've met us and you've had an opportunity to ask questions and get to know us and hear about things face-to-face, I think is a real strength of this course. And we always really enjoy coming out for those workshops. It's worth saying that this PGCEi course is a course that takes place all over the world. So you would become part of a global family. So the course has been running for 10 or 11 years, and it runs in something like 20 or so locations around the world. At any one time, we've probably got 900 and something students on the course in different places. So you're part of a global family, but the cohort we're talking about today is one that will meet in the UAE and be based there. So at these face-to-face events, not only do you get to meet your tutor, and we normally have a large cohort starting every October, which will be about 100 students typically, and we split you off for most of the time into a smaller group of around 20 with a particular tutor, so you really get to know us. But also an important part is getting to know your peers. So when you work in any educational setting, whatever that might be, it's very easy to get stuck into one way of doing things, and it's easy to get used to a particular school system and the way that things are done and the kind of ethos and the values of that system. One of the great advantages of this course is we're going to put you into groups with people who teach in different parts of the UAE and beyond, the different parts of the Middle East, in different age phases, from early years through to people who perhaps teach adults, and with people who teach in different types of school. So typically we have people who teach in British curriculum schools, American curriculum schools, IB schools, SABIS schools, all kinds of different settings. And what you'll learn from each other, that kind of networking that goes on, is really useful for your career, but also very enlightening in terms of understanding a bit of a broader sense of what education is all about. And I said that this wasn't a license to teach qualification, it's that academic qualification. What it's going to do, though, it is going to have an impact, I'm sure, on your teaching. Whether you are a classroom learning support assistant, or you're a teacher in school, or you have some other educator role, it's going to get you to look differently at what you do. So master's level study is something that asks big questions about education and deals with some of the big principles behind what we do in education settings. So originally, going back quite a few years, I was a teacher in school. And while I was teaching in school, I did my MA and I studied that. And I can say firsthand, first of all, I know what it's like to study in your spare time, essentially, on top of a job. So one of the things people worry about sometimes is whether that's feasible. So I know what that's like, but also more importantly, I know how that opened my eyes to all sorts of different practices and ideas. And I know my teaching was really rejuvenated by studying at this kind of level and thinking about things differently, looking at new perspectives. So while our aim is not to give you specific tips for the classroom and to try and give you an activity that you can use when you go back into school on Sunday or whatever, it's about things that will have an impact on what you do and will get you to see a world of education beyond the place you're working right now at the moment. So the course structure, the course is based on 3 modules. And although those 3 modules that you study through the year are compulsory, we have a sort of motto for the course, which is about the learner, so that's you, the learner creating the blend, an individual blend on the course. And what that means is, although the modules are compulsory, what you do within the modules and the way that you tailor your study, the choices you make about particular units to study, and the choices you make about your assignments mean that everybody's going to have a unique journey through the course. All of you are going to bring different experiences of being a learner in school yourself and having roles in school now, perhaps. All of you've got that background, which is unique, but also you're going to choose different pathways through these modules. And you'll be able to relate the materials and the things that you study to your particular role. So if you are a teaching assistant in kindergarten, for example, you can select things and you can write about things in assignments that relate to that. If you are a secondary teacher of maths or science or anything else, you can tailor the materials in that direction. So everybody will have this kind of unique blend. So we have these 3 modules, and the idea is that they take you on a kind of a journey. So the first module is all about educational aims and values. So we start off by asking some big questions about what education is for. And sometimes these are things we've never thought about. We go to work every day in a school or some other educational setting, and we work hard and we do a good job. But how often do we pause and ask what the big purpose of this is? So some people, for example, would say education is all about getting learners to get qualifications. Other people would say, well, the most important thing is to equip them for being a good citizen and being able to support themselves financially as an adult. Other people would say the purpose of education is to make society a better place and the world a better place. Other people might say it's about developing a person holistically and leading to their own self-fulfillment in a unique way, and so on. So there are all kinds of purposes that education might have and all sorts of different emphases. So we're going to talk about some of those big ideas. We're going to specifically in Module 1 relate that to international schooling. So this is where the I in the PGCEi comes in, because our materials are materials that are geared towards being an international educator. And so we want to look at what we mean by international education and what some of the special challenges and opportunities and features are. And then we're going to take that idea of values and aims into your own personal values and aims. So having learnt about some of those things, where does that leave you? And what do you stand for? What's important for you? So Module 1 is all about those big questions. Module 2 follows on nicely because it's talking about learning and teaching. So if we've established a sense of what education might be for, how do we then enact that? How do we do that? So we look at different theories of learning, and we look at them with a critical eye and evaluate what they might mean for us in our different contexts. And we look at some aspects of teaching. So we look at things that you'll be familiar with every day if you're working in schools, to do with behaviour, to do with special educational needs, planning, assessment, English as an additional language, and so on. So we look at aspects of education, aspects of learning, and we ask you to apply that to the context you're working in and to reflect on what those different theories and different ideas mean for you. And finally, the third module takes our journey to a logical conclusion, because we thought about what education is for, we've thought about how we might do it and how we might teach, and finally we're saying, well, how can we be sure that our learners have understood what we teach? So in the final module, we get you to do a piece of inquiry, you do a mini research project, you pick something that you're interested in, something that you teach your students, and we ask you to set up a piece of research to find out something about how they have understood what you've taught them. And that is also geared up to trying to get you in the habits of being an inquiring teacher, a teacher who in future could actually inquire and research their own practice. So we're trying to get those habits for you. There are no exams on this course. Each of those modules I've mentioned, the 3 modules, 20 credits each, equally weighted, are assessed by a 4,000 word assignment. But it's important to be clear that when we say 4,000 words, there are some options with these assignments. So in each case, you could choose to do a 4,000 word written piece, or you could choose to be assessed through a different medium. So you could be assessed through, in some cases, for example, a presentation. So you might present to camera, record yourself doing that, and that would be something equivalent to a 4,000 word assignment. Or in some cases, you might film an aspect of you in the classroom, and you might provide a commentary to go with that film. Again, that would be equivalent to 4,000 words worth of work. So you've got an opportunity over the 3 modules to be assessed in forms that are written forms, or in each case you could choose a different form where it's something more spoken or in the mode of a presentation. In each of those cases, people are often worried about the academic side of the work. Sometimes working at master's level might sound quite intimidating, or perhaps you haven't studied academically for a long time. So every year we have people who are worried about those kind of things. So we know about that, and we set out through the workshops we do and through the materials to try and reassure you and to make sure that we bring you up to speed with what's expected. We show you some examples of work at this level, and we really help to get those skills to where they need to be. And through the assignments, in each case, we ask you to submit a proposal for the assignment. So your tutor can feed back to you on your ideas before you commit to doing the full assignment. And in the first module, there's some extra structure because we ask you, or we allow you to submit a full draft, which the tutor can comment on in depth and give you lots of feedback on. It's not graded, and then you can go away and work on that and that can set you up for your full assignment there. So all sorts of things that will provide you with some kind of structure there. The other thing to say with this is that, we'll move on to the next slide here, is that these credits can be used towards a full MA. So if you choose after this course to continue studying, and you want to continue studying with the University of Nottingham, you can use the 60 credits you've received towards an MA in education. And an MA is 180 credits, so that means that you've got a third of your MA already done and already paid for. And at any point within 10 years, you can use those credits. It doesn't have to be immediately, and you can continue and do the other 2/3 of your MA. You could do that at a distance, online, or you could do it face-to-face through a summer school or attending here at the university, or a mixture of the two. So every year it's great to see people from PGCEi course who continue their studies with us. So that's worth bearing in mind. As it says here on the second point on this slide, all of the materials you need for the course are provided. So as part of the package, you have our virtual learning environment that you work through, and you have all of the modules broken down into different units and different focus points. And in each case, you have readings, core readings that are embedded in those materials. You then also have links to further reading, which you can access in the form of electronic books or electronic journals. So you don't need to be going to a library to get hard copy books. And then also you have access to the university library website, where you can then do your own broader searches of literature, and you can find extra sources of your own, again, that you can access electronically. The materials that are provided include not only those kind of readings, but audio material and video material. And you'd be joining the course at an exciting and a great time if you started with one of our next cohorts, because every approximately 5 years the course is updated, and we're just finalizing that process this summer. So from September onwards, any cohorts beginning will be working on our new version of the course, which has updated readings, updated materials. So you would be one of the first groups to have this fully updated version of all of those things. So we'll turn now to thinking a little bit about entry requirements. So this is a postgraduate course, as we said, at master's level. So the usual position is that you would have your bachelor's degree. In some cases, however, there may be people who don't have a bachelor's degree but have other extensive qualifications or extensive professional experience, which could be considered to be equivalent. So in those cases, it's always worth contacting your Stafford consultant initially, and they will help you to sort of find out whether you might be eligible for the course even without that degree. But the vast majority of our people are going to be graduates who have that bachelor's degree. There's also an English language requirement, because the course is taught in English, all materials are in English, so we need a certain level of English to enable you to be successful on the course. And you can see there the IELTS standard that you would need to reach, unless you've already been educated in English at an approved institution, or English is, of course, your first language. Other things to bear in mind, it says here you need to be an established educator. What does that mean? It could mean all sorts of things. So some people who come on our course are already working as teachers. Some people are learning support assistants or teaching assistants. Some people are volunteering in schools. Some people have other roles within educational settings. So the idea of educator, which we deliberately say rather than teacher, is a broad term, and all sorts of people can qualify in that sense. But you do need access to a classroom. And the reason for that is what I said before about you creating this unique blend of the course that is to do with your own context that you work in. So the assignments and the materials you work with all require you to be thinking about and writing about what you do in the classroom setting. So again, to reiterate, we're not coming in to assess you and see what you do. but you need to be writing about real things from a real classroom setting. And of course, because lots of the course is done through online materials, you do need internet access. We've already talked here about the non-standard application. So if you do feel that somehow your application doesn't quite fit that usual profile, contact Stafford and we'll have a look at on a case-by-case basis at those things. The kinds of things you're going to need for your application are listed here. We probably don't need to talk about all of these things, but I usually like to just mention, first of all, the reference. So think carefully about who's going to be your referee, who's going to write a reference for you, and the kind of things they might say about you. So choosing somebody who can comment on your qualities as a teacher or an educator might be important, but also it might be important to have somebody who can talk about other qualities you're going to need for this course. So for example, the kind of skills that you're going to need, the skills of time management, good communication, good academic skills, etc. So the more that your referee knows about the course and the kind of things that are likely to be making you successful, the more they can write about those things in their reference. So think carefully about that idea of who you choose and what you tell them about. And the other thing to pick out here is the personal statement. So in your brief personal statement, try and tell us about your motivation for the course. What is it that you want to get out of this? Why are you so keen to do this? Tell us about your educational experiences and background, so your professional context and how this might relate, and what you bring to the course in that sense, and also those transferable skills I just mentioned. Lots of people on this course have worked in other fields. We have people who are often career changers, and sometimes they devalue their background and think that they're starting from scratch, whereas in fact, of course, they bring all kinds of useful, transferable, relevant skills. So talk about those things as well. Anything you think might help us to see you as a successful participant on this course. So we have 2 intakes every year. We start a group in October, 1st of October, and we start another group on the 1st of March. So the next intake, of course, is the October intake. We are very, very nearly full for this. In fact, I think we are just about at the stage of putting people on the waiting list for that. It's always a very popular cohort, and we have a strict limit on numbers at around 100 students so that we can make sure we have good staff and student ratios. So you can still certainly apply for this October, but you need to know that we're very close to being full, and we are at that sort of waiting list stage at the moment. If you began in October, the course would begin on the 1st of October. And you can see here the workshop dates would be the 11th and 12th of October, so just right at the beginning of your course. And then the halfway through workshop that I mentioned would be the 6th and 7th of March, so weekend workshops. If you were looking further ahead to the next cohort, that would be starting in March, and they would have a workshop in March, and their second workshop would be in October. So the same principle of having one at the start and one about halfway through. It's worth saying that these workshops are compulsory. They're a compulsory part of the course. If you feel that you are not able to attend, or you may not be able to attend, you definitely need to defer your entry and join a later cohort when you know you can attend. So the workshops contain all sorts of vital information and experiences that you're going to need to be successful. And they are actually built in to the credits of this new version of the course, so that it's actually something you have to attend in order to pass the course, unless there is some exceptional unforeseen circumstance sort of partway through the course. You can see here also the fees and the application fee. So we've been through our slides, and we're going to move on to dealing with any questions that you might have. Hopefully what we've talked about has answered quite a few things you may have been wondering about, but I'll do my best to answer anything else. And Helen, as usual, I think, is going to sort of perhaps gather together your questions, as mentioned before, into themes, because typically we have several people asking about similar types of things. Okay.
Super. Thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. That was excellent. We'll go straight into one of the questions from Edward. Does the MA allow one to teach in the UK, or is further study required? And if so, does the University of Nottingham offer these extra courses?
So there's a very good question, one that often people are interested in, about being qualified to teach in the UK. So to teach in the UK, normally you need to have qualified teacher status, which is an English qualification. Even though people talk about this sometimes worldwide, it's an English qualification that qualifies you to teach in schools here. So qualified teacher status, QTS, as mentioned already, is not part of this course. And it's also not something you get by achieving the full MA if you continued your studies. So what you would need to do is, additionally to this course, you would need to gain QTS, and the usual route for doing that is what's called an assessment only route to QTS. And what that means is you can be assessed on the job. So typically, for example, you might come back to the UK if that's what you're interested in. You might get a job as an unqualified teacher or teaching assistant in a school. And as long as you have a teaching role, so people can assess you teaching, you can then be assessed in the space of a term through people in school observing you and an external assessor coming in, looking at a portfolio of evidence and looking at some of your teaching and witnessing that. So that would be the thing that would allow you to gain QTS. University of Nottingham doesn't provide that assessment only route at this point, but there are all sorts of providers all over the country here that do. So if you just Googled assessment only QTS, you'll find the government's website, the gov.uk website. And on there, you'll see a list of all the providers. So whichever part of the country you might be interested in, you'll see people who do that. What we are investigating, and we hope to develop this a little bit more, is we're investigating whether some providers of this in the UK might eventually be able to come out to the Middle East and actually assess people for this in situ where you are in the school before you come back to the UK. So that's not something the University of Nottingham would provide. It would still be done by a different university, but we're trying to find out a little bit more about those possibilities so we can perhaps signpost those things in future. But the usual way would be to come back to the UK for that.
Good, and we've got quite a few questions regarding English and the IELTS. So as I said, I've grouped those questions together. But basically the questions are, if I have completed a degree in English, whether it is from a Kuwaiti university or an American university, do I still need to do the IELTS exam?
So the question there is one that is, the answer is it depends. So you may be exempt from the IELTS. What it'll depend on is whether that university, wherever it may be, is a recognised one that the University of Nottingham admissions team has on its records. So what you just need to do is let us know through Stafford about that university, and we can have a look and see if it's one of those recognised universities. And if it is, then you may be exempt from that.
Good. And a question from Nora. How are the tutors available to us over and above the face-to-face sessions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. So from what I've said to you, you might have thought perhaps we just are going to come out and see you a couple of times, and other than that, you're on your own. So that's absolutely not the case. So your tutor that's assigned to you is there to give you advice throughout the course. So so I'm a tutor. I lead the cohort, but I have my own group of students every year. So my students can email me at any time, and I'll get back to them with advice. And they can also arrange to have tutorials. So we can do that. Sometimes we can arrange to do that through a medium like Skype. Obviously, in some regions, it's not possible to do that. And we can either look into different platforms or have a telephone tutorial sometimes. But by prior arrangement, you can do something like that. and we are always there to give you that advice as you go through. And that tutor who you've met in the UAE at the face-to-face workshop is the person that's going to be marking your work. So in a way, you're going to be getting into a kind of dialogue with that person. They're going to be looking at your proposals. So with my group, for example, I'm feeding back on everybody's proposals and giving advice. Maybe we go back and forth with a few questions and emails. Then I'm looking at the assignments. I'm giving feedback on those. And again, maybe there are more queries that arise there. So through the year, we get to know each other pretty well in between times as well. So you do have that support throughout the course.
Okay, and Sadaf's question is, I am a mother of 3 kids and I am a teacher as well at the moment. Will I be able to have flexibility in submitting my assignments, or do I have to strictly stick to the deadline dates?
Yeah, so it's natural, isn't it, to worry about balancing off all of those commitments, and especially family commitments. So there's 2 parts to this answer. First of all, we do have set deadlines. So although you can work through each module fairly flexibly, and of course you can tailor your working week on the course to how you choose to work, whether it's in one big chunk or a little bit every day or whatever it might be, you do have to meet the deadlines. They are strict deadlines. There are penalties for submitting work late. So those are not negotiable. However, if you have any unforeseen circumstances that crop up to do with unforeseen things like illness or something unpredictable that's happened to do with your job, for example, you can apply for an extension. So you have to do that through a formal process, and it goes to a panel who may decide whether there's enough evidence. There needs to be some evidence to support that. So that's one way that you may be able to have an extension on your deadline. The other thing is that, of course, we know sometimes life changes unpredictably and gets in the way. If at any point you feel like your circumstances have changed and it's not a case of having another week or 2 to finish the assignment, but it's a bit of a longer term issue, you can quite easily arrange to take some time out of the course. So we call it a voluntary interruption to study. And as long as you've got a reasonably good reason for that, you can take some time out. It could be a couple of months, it could be even a year, and the course is paused. You can't continue to work in that time on the course, but there are no penalties or anything, and then you pick up the course at the end of that period just where you left off with new deadlines and carry on. So if you do feel that things, for instance, family issues are just too much, you can apply to do that. So there are ways that we can work with you and we can be flexible with you, but they are things for which you need to make formal arrangements. In the normal way, the deadlines are ones you have to stick to.
Would this program be recognized in Canada? I am planning on immigrating quite soon.
Well, a program of master's level study like this will be recognized and understood in Canada, I'm sure, as it would in most countries. What I can't say to you and guarantee you is whether that's going to open a door for you in terms of a specific career option. In Canada, like every country, there will be particular national requirements for teachers. I think Canada is very much like the US, where every region in Canada, whether you're in Quebec or British Columbia or whichever part of Canada you're in, will have its own kind of state regulations and qualification requirements, I'm sure. So you would need to check, the more general point for everybody is you would need to check wherever you are about what's required as a teacher. If your question though is a bit more general, then you're saying, well, I'm not relying on this to be a qualified teacher, but I'm just asking whether it would be recognized on my CV, my resume, as being a good, worthwhile thing, then I think the answer is much clearer, that this would be seen as being a really good thing there. But if it's about teacher qualification specifically, you really just need to check locally wherever you're going to be.
Okay, and Junaid is again just regarding an English requirement. Junaid, do get in touch with your academic consultant, and we'll be able to advise you on various ways that you can meet that English requirement. So do get in touch with us as soon as possible for that. Okay, and The next one is regarding the waiting list. Again, Sana, do get in touch with us at Stafford so that we can advise you how the waiting list actually does work. Yes, there is a very good chance of people that are on the waiting list to actually move into the good list so that you can actually start the program. There are circumstances where students may not be able to attend the workshops. So, people do move up on those waiting lists. But please do get in touch with us and we'll be able to advise you accordingly. Okay, and I have booked my IELTS on the 17th of August. Can I apply without the result? Yes, at the moment you can actually submit your application and we'll send that through to the university to see if you academically meet the relevant entry requirement. We need to receive your IELTS exam before the program actually commences. So you would need to speak to your testing centre to ensure that we do get the result prior to the commencement of the program. Okay. Right, and the next question again is a very popular question. I see that there are only 3 modules, so can I complete this program in 6 to 8 months?
Well, in principle, if people want to do a sort of fast track of this program, we have tried to be flexible. And it's something we tend to say that you could negotiate with your tutor, and it may be possible to submit things a little bit earlier. In practice, I would say this almost never happens. So I'm struggling to think of the last time this did happen over the last few years, to be honest, because what most people find is, although it's absolutely achievable in the time we give you, and people do manage to get through the course, it is quite a busy schedule of work. So it's unusual for people to feel that they could accelerate in that way. If you do get through the first module and still feel like you'd like then to speed up with things, you can talk to your tutor. We can negotiate things there. One thing to bear in mind, however, is that the university, like all universities, formally processes your results at exam boards just a few times a year, which meet, and only at that point is your qualification formally passed and ratified. So even if you finish a little bit early and you've completed all the work, it doesn't necessarily mean you get your award any quicker. It just depends when the next exam board is. So you might actually finish a bit early, but then still end up going through the same exam board and the same approval process as everybody else. So it's not necessarily the case that you can receive your award more quickly. When we talk about the course being a 12-month course, however, that really includes the sort of build up right at the beginning. It includes the time we spend marking and moderating the final assignment. So your actual window of working is more like 10 months, 10 and a half months, that sort of time. So it's not quite as long as you think. Usually for an October starting cohort, your last piece of work will be given in early July, typically.
Again, a very interesting question is, what is the difference between a teaching and an academic qualification?
Well, what we mean by this is the academic qualification carries university credits and it leads to a university award, an academic award. So in the same way that you could get a bachelor's degree, for example, a bachelor's degree is a recognized academic qualification, but it doesn't mean that you are a qualified engineer, accountant, or anything else necessarily. What you have alongside that sometimes are professional qualifications. So if you were going to be an accountant or an engineer or something like that, you would have a professional qualification that you would need to do. And the same is true of teachers. So teaching has sometimes in some countries has a professional qualification like QTS, qualified teacher status, that sits alongside an academic award. So in the UK, if you study to be a teacher, you would study a course very often that has the academic award, but also has the professional qualification built into the same course. So although it feels like one course, you would be doing those two different qualifications simultaneously. So what we're saying here is you're not doing a professional qualification that gives you a license to teach in any way. What you're doing is just an academic qualification that gives you an academic award. So I hope that makes the distinction a little bit clearer.
Okay, and I'm assuming that we will be able to attend the graduation at the university with all the full-time students. In the event that I cannot make this, how do I get my degree?
Yeah, so we're always really delighted if you can come and join us for graduation. And we have 2 graduation ceremonies in the year. So it depends on which cohort you join and when you finish. But if we were talking about the cohort starting in October, for example, they would normally come to a graduation the following December, which takes place just before Christmas. So it's always after schools have finished and are on holiday. So people are theoretically able to come, they're not having to come out of work or anything. Other people who are perhaps on a different schedule might come to our July ceremony, again, at a time when you're not teaching in school. So we're delighted, and certainly you are invited, and you can attend that graduation ceremony alongside full-time students in education. So you have all of the kind of the big ceremony that goes on with hundreds of people in a huge hall, and all of that, you know, spectacular ritual that you go through, which is great to be part of, a real occasion. Of course, lots and lots of people can't come to Nottingham for that ceremony, understandably. So what happens for them is that they, at a certain point, are asked to make this decision: are they going to come or not come? And if you don't, then you have your certificate sent to you. And if you're on the cohort starting in October, usually the following October is around about the time you would have your certificate sent to you. So you graduate in absence, essentially. You know, you are a graduate, it's all formally done, you have your certificate, but you haven't had to come to get it in person.
Okay, and for those that cannot start the program 9 October, I do see quite a few questions about the next cohort, which does start in March. Yeah. Okay, and the next question would be, will this program actually allow me to teach in any subject, or do I have to have a specific subject which is related to my bachelor degree?
Well, so 2 parts to this, I suppose. One thing is just to say again, if you mean, does this qualify you to teach a certain subject, we need to be clear about it not being a license to teach. If you mean, however, does this have relevance for you teaching all sorts of different subjects, then the answer is yes. You can tailor the course to any subject that you teach. You might be in a primary or kindergarten age group, teaching a variety of subjects, or perhaps just 1 or 2. You might be a secondary teacher who's more of a subject specialist. So whatever your role is, you can, the materials are general and generic, and the principles that are talked about can be applied to any phase and any subject in education. And then you can select certain options, certain units and focus activities within each module that will relate best to the particular things that you teach. So in that sense, you can personalize the course and make it as relevant as possible for you.
Okay, and I'm just going to answer 2 questions related to schools. It is imperative that you do have access to a classroom, even if you are volunteering. So do make sure that by the time you commence your program, that you do have that access. Even if there is a letter that needs to be submitted by the school, please ensure that you do submit that. But you must have access to the classroom, as Dr. Rupert has stated. And with regards to documentation to be submitted, please do get in touch with your academic consultant so we can advise you exactly what documents are required for the university to assess. Okay. All right. And quickly from Sadaf. Sadaf has actually got a degree from 2002. and she has been teaching for the past 12 years. The question is here that she may not have, the actual transcripts. Would this be accepted by the university?
I think we'd have to look at that specific case, Sadaf, and have a look at that on a more personal basis through Stafford initially, and then our admissions department. Clearly, we are going to need some kind of proof of your study. So the fact that it was quite some time ago is not really a problem, but there will need to be some kind of proof of that. So I think through Stafford initially, if you can seek some advice about exactly what documentation is acceptable, that would be the best thing.
Okay, and Noor's question is again, she's got no teaching experience. She has wonderful years of experience in the medical field, qualified assurance manager for the past 10 years, both in the medical and laboratory and forensic setting. Obviously, she wants to get into the education field, but currently doesn't have the access. So we have touched on this, Noor, and I'm glad to see that you've got such a great background. But you must have access to a classroom, again, even if it's just volunteering. So do get in touch with your Stafford consultant, and we'll be able to give you some advice on how you can go about doing that. But you would need to have some access to that classroom. Okay. What exactly is covered in the face-to-face meetings, and how long are these sessions? Do they last right through into the evening?
Right, so the face-to-face workshops are quite packed and quite busy. We don't take you into the evening though. We do allow you a little bit of a break. It is the weekend after all. So the workshops have a number of aims. They tend to run from about 9 till 4:30. That's about the time that you need to be thinking about for that Friday and Saturday in each case. We have the aims that we have include getting you familiar with some of the big ideas that are going to be in the modules that you cover. So we'll look at some activities and give you some input about some of the key principles and ideas that you're going to encounter. And in some cases, we'll almost preview and rehearse some of the thinking that you'll need by doing activities that get you discussing and thinking about those things. We also want to give you a sense of being able to meet your fellow students. So lots of the way that we work in those face-to-face events is collaborative. We get you to do a lot of work together in groups, talking to each other, mixing around into different groups, so that you have a sense of learning from each other and learning about things from all sorts of different perspectives. We also try and get you reassured about the course. So we want to give you a bit of navigation through the course. So we'll show you how the online VLE, the virtual learning environment, works, and we'll show you what we mean by certain assignments. We'll show you some examples of that. So another of our aims is to give you some familiarization with that. And I suppose our other key aim is to get you excited and enthusiastic about being a learner again. And we want to interest you, we want to capture your imagination with things that perhaps challenge your thinking and send you away with your head spinning a little bit and wondering about things that you hadn't wondered about before. So we pack a lot in. Each of the days though has breaks. You have coffee breaks, you have lunch breaks, all of the refreshments there are provided, and I know Helen will agree there's no shortage of food to eat, so you're going to have a good weekend and you'll be fed very well as working hard.
Okay, and is there any possibility for me to attend the university during my studies?
Well, this is not a formal part of the course, but if you happen to be in the UK and you want to come to Nottingham and by prior arrangement you want to see if your tutor's available and come and meet them, then I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem. I'm sure they'd be really delighted to see you. So, you know, we very much think of you as being a University of Nottingham student. Just because you may be based somewhere else for now doesn't mean you're different in any way. So if you're here in the country, then it would be great to see you.
if I do stop my studies for a short while and then resume again, what would be the maximum time period that I can complete the program?
So we have a maximum registration time of 3 years. So that's an absolute boundary we have to stick to. It's a university regulation. What that means though really is if the course is taking you about a year, you can see that there is scope for quite lengthy periods of interruption if you needed to. That isn't ideal, of course, and it wouldn't be anybody's first choice of things to do, but it does mean that you have got a little bit of scope built in, a bit of a buffer built into that system. So 3 years is the maximum time.
Okay, and Edward's second question is, can the classroom be third level?
Okay, maybe you can clarify what you mean by third level. That might mean different things in different places. Perhaps I'm interpreting it that you might mean talking with, working with adult learners as opposed to sort of primary, secondary. If that's what you mean, then our broad concept of being an educator is fine at that kind of tertiary level. What I would say is that most of the materials, the readings and things that you'll be encountering are going to be relating to a school setting. Most of the research that's done in education that we use will be around working with school age students, but the principles will apply with any age, and it would be absolutely okay to be working with older adult learners if you're thinking of tertiary education, third level in that sense.
Okay, and Edward has just sent us a message. He says, I'm teaching as a TA at the university and have access to lab and tutorial classes.
Yeah, so that's fine in principle, but I would just sound one note of caution about the fact that most of what we talk about will be in a school context.
Right. And last question from Chantal. If she does join the classroom, if she does join the program, she'll be flying in from Tanzania. And do we accept students from Tanzania? And
yeah. So you're very welcome wherever you are. And you know, we have some students who are quite local. This goes for all of our cohorts all over the world, and some people fly in from further afield. And I think as far as we're concerned, the more diverse the makeup of students, the more interesting it is for everybody. So you're very, very welcome.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to add one thing. They just do ensure, though, that you are able to commit to the mandatory workshops. It's imperative that you can actually come to those. Okay, but do get in touch with your academic consultant and we'll be able to advise you more on that. And that's all the questions for us this evening. I've managed to group them all together. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Lovely questions. And again, Dr. Rupert, a great pleasure having you with us. And we'll obviously be seeing you shortly at our upcoming cohort.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Helen. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening. Good luck with your applications. And I hope we do see you in future very soon. Thank you.